Добрий день. Не чути. Чути? Oh, yes, now it's working. Perfect. So, good afternoon, everyone, here at the Ukrainian Pavilion in Belém at COP30. I am Diana Popfalуши from the Ukrainian Climate Network, and I am an environmental activist since 2013 with the background in international relations. And I think as many, me as also a lot of you here are really passionate about the future of Ukraine and what is going on. And we decided at some point of our time to dedicate at least a part of our time to be active and to provide changes in the country we were born or we are passionate about. So today's panel, we will be talking about the civil society, climate resilience, and recovery processes. And this discussion brings together organizations and experts who have proven that even under the most challenging times, having a war going on in the country, Ukraine's civil society is still driving climate action, innovation, and hope. And we woke up in Berlin just today to know that Ukraine was heavily attacked, and we even have 25 dead proven people in the city of Ternopil, which is in the western part of Ukraine, not near to the front line. So we see how devastating everything is. And despite the circumstances we are still going on, we are still working. And I will also tell a bit about the Ukrainian Climate Network. And I'm really happy to have here members from the network also taking part in the panel. So we are 41 NGOs from Ukraine working on the topic of climate change, more or less from different sectors, from the sector of waste management, climate change, activism, youth empowerment, and so on. So we will start then our panel today with inputs from our panelists, and then we will have time for Q&A. And to frame our discussion, I will invite Леннард ДЕ КЛЕРК, author of the report and methodology on war's impact on Ukraine. So the recent report has been only a few days ago presented here also in Belém. Tells us how the war affects our ecosystems, how many carbon emissions from which sectors are produced, and how can be the effects, the long-standing effects of this emission on our economy and on the world in general. And on the basis of the report, we know that there will be future claims to justice over the destruction the Russian war caused to Ukrainian ecosystems. And I'm really happy that not only Ukrainian, but international media caught on this information, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. So Леннард, based on your research, what are the most significant findings observed and how we want to hold the aggressor accountable for it and for the climate damage? And I would also ask you to show some concrete examples on how green and low carbon recovery in Ukraine could look like. So I will then ask him to show the first presentation of our expert and pass the mic to you. Oh, you have already.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. Actually, I will go to the presentation a little bit later. I will indeed summarize on the work that we've been doing so far. But before starting that, actually, I would like to recall how we got started. Because when the full-scale invasion happened, and at that time I was living in northern eastern Hungary. I have there a climate-neutral holiday resort. And when the flow of refugees was coming towards Europe, for us, I mean, I have lived in Kiev. I still have friends over there, old colleagues. It was a very natural thing to open our resort and to help Ukrainians on their way to Europe. And at some point I was, and I think it is just 4 or 5 weeks into the full-scale invasion, I was thinking, you know, what can I do more to help Ukraine in this terrible situation? And when I like to swim, so I do it 2 to 3 times a week. And when I swim, then my sort of thinking starts flowing automatically. So that's where I normally have good ideas. And then came the idea, you know, I'm a carbon expert. Why don't we look into the impact of the war on the climate? But I immediately had the sort of restraint. I said, well, you know, is this appropriate to do actually when people are dying? You know, this isn't the time to start nagging about this distant climate change and so on. So I felt a bit like maybe this is not the right thing to do. And when I then, you know, contact some Ukrainian friends, and I said, yeah, well, I have this idea, but probably not. The reaction was immediately, do it. Yes, show the world what Russia is doing and what damage is it causing, and if that's damage to the climate, you know, make sure that that's also get known. So for me, that was really, I needed that feedback from my Ukrainian friends to get emboldened to get started. And then very quickly I got connected to Anna Ackerman and to Eco Action, because, you know, we needed a partner on the ground, and that's how we got started. And yeah, the cooperation has been you know, growing and growing, and actually, you know, with the announcement that the deputy minister made on the claim, so we are really are progressing. But still, it's I just came off from just a coffee break from an old friend, and I explained her what we're doing and said, but they are at war. But, you know, people wouldn't really be interested, and it's the opposite. So, and it's opposite because it's civil society that's pushing for it. So that's basically also the topic that we are talking about. So talking about climate damage, indeed, we have now released 5 reports. The latest report was released just a month ago, covering 3 years of war. We're talking about 237 million tons of CO2 emissions that can be attributed to the act of aggression. So had Russia not invaded Ukraine, these emissions would not have happened. And we've used the so-called social cost of carbon, which is a metric that describes that for each ton of CO2 you emit, what are the future damages to society. And then basically calculating back to have the net present value for today. That number is $185 per ton of CO2. So we are talking about almost 44 billion US dollars that the Russians are causing to the climate. We had to reinvent the wheel. Nobody had done it before, so it was, you know, it was from an intellectual point of view also challenging to do, but we managed to do it. We even developed generic guidance so that other conflicts could use the experience from Ukraine. But now we are at the next step, and that is that we want to hold the aggressor, also accountable for those emissions. The deputy minister made that statement yesterday. That was the easy part of doing it, but that will mean that in the coming months we will have to get lawyers involved, have to get it financed, and then be ready once the register of damage opens up to the environmental damage category. We can immediately submit it and then see how it goes. It will be a long process, that's for sure, and we don't know what the outcome will be. But even the fact that we're starting it, we are already, I mean, this is the first time that a state is going to be held accountable for emissions that are released as a result of an unlawful act, which is the act of aggression as of today. And I do want to, before I go to the more technical part, and we had yesterday on the event also discussion on how important it is to have institutions and etc. and democracy. I think yes, to have proper institutions, that's correct. But in Ukraine, actually, it is the civil society that keeps the country running. Had you know, when Russia invaded Ukraine, it thought it had to deal with the state only. It turned out to be it had to fight against a whole society, and that was exactly the miscalculation of Putin when he invaded Ukraine. That it would not be a walk in the park. It would not be easy to do it, and you know, civil society. We've seen it now also during war. You make sure that if your government goes off track of rails, even during war, you make sure you steer them back on track. You know, I've been coming to Ukraine many times, and each time, you know, when they really mess up, you run to the Maidan Square and correct things. So, but really, I mean, sometimes I have to explain people, you know, what's the difference between Ukraine and your northern neighbor? Well, I think that it's exactly that. That's why you're not part of Eurasia, but that's why you're part of Europe, and that's why you should be part of the EU as well very soon. Going to my presentation, I just wanted to show actually two examples of how civil society universities are working on the green recovery, because as you probably know, many of the emissions or a big share of this war emissions is for the reconstruction. These are future emissions. If we have a green recovery, if we have a low carbon recovery, we can avoid many of these emissions to happen, and that's exactly also what we want: this compensation money from Russia, if it will ever come, to be used to, you know, to walk the extra mile for the green recovery. And I'm just showing, these are not my slides, but just two projects which I'm super enthusiastic about. So next one, please. And that is for this from Rethink. You probably know them. It's the upcycling of concrete. You know, because of all the debris, there will be enormous availability of concrete that has been used. And what you normally do, I mean, reusing concrete as a virgin material is from a technical point of view very complicated. So normally you would just crush it and use it for backfilling, for example, which is basically downcycling. But what they're trying now to do is to upcycle it. So make sure that you can make new cement, new concrete from this material. And I think if you do the next slide, this is actually how you would do it. So you have the destroyed building, you would then crush it. I'm not an expert on this, but you would then basically, you have the separation, and then under the thermal treatment, that's where actually the from a technical point of view, the interesting stuff happens. So you can upcycle it and then basically close the loop. So super interesting. Circularity is, I mean, everywhere in Europe, relatively new, but that Ukraine is already, you know, working on this in work situations. I think it's fantastic. Next slide. And I think, yeah, this is the pilot project they're working on at the moment, which is, if I'm not correct, close to Kiev. Next one. Yeah, and the other one project, also a typical NGO-driven project. It's from a Dutch organization, Open Door Ukraine. Actually, this man was the first Dutch ambassador to Ukraine. He got married to a Ukrainian, and he, when the war broke out, started his own NGO to assist Ukraine, mainly in the recovery. But also seeing if we can, you know, build houses for internally displaced people within Ukraine. He teamed up with two organizations, Roblox and Hempire. Hempire is a Ukrainian company that produces hemp, not for smoking, but for building, just to be on the safe side. And Roblox is a Dutch company that makes these kind of panels that you see there. So it's timber framed, but it's filled with hemp as an insulation material. Next slide, please. Well, a lot of numbers, but you know, we are here at the climate conference. The beauty of bio-based construction materials is not only you avoid emissions, but you also store it. So you have actually a negative impact in a positive way on the climate. And yeah, so you see how many tons you can save with these kind of bio homes. So build back bio. I love the phrasing. Next one, please. Yeah, here they're just, well, a lot of text, but here they're just a picture. And actually, so it's the tall guy, Dutch, of course. And I recently spoke to him on the Ukrainian Recovery Conference. He says, you know, so he is the inventor of the system, the Roblox. He said, I've been trying to do this for years in the Netherlands, and it's difficult because permitting, it's too expensive. And I said, I got involved in Ukraine. And the next thing we're building now a production line in Ukraine. So the guy is super happy that finally he can get things done. So sometimes I think Ukraine, there is a bit of mentality we have to learn from, you know, Europe. Here it's the other way around. Next one. Yeah. It's just for the picture. So here, actually, you can see they're putting together a house, because the beauty of this timber framework is you can make it in the factory. So that's the line that they're now setting up in Ukraine, and the assembly of the house on spot is very quick, and therefore also cost effective. Yeah. So that basically brings me to the end of my intervention.
Yeah, thank you so much, Леннард, and thank you so much for stressing the role of the civil society in Ukraine. This is really true, and I think many of us know that this is happening, and especially after Maidan, because my activist life also got scaled up after 2013, after the Maidan situation. And then I was told, and I think a lot of us also were told, okay, why are you staying in Ukraine? Why don't you leave the country? Because Ukraine offers a lot of possibilities, and we have a lot of open niches. And if there is no niche, you can just invent one and do it yourself. So, and this is really true. And this is what is happening right now. So thank you so much. And now we will move on to climate advocacy and climate change policies. And I have a pleasure to invite our next speaker, Soph'ya SADOGURSCKA, a climate expert from the NGO EcoAction. And EcoAction is one of the biggest and well-known organizations in Ukraine, and they are working on different topics from agriculture resilience to just transition and to protecting our nature in general. And this is the NGO who is really giving me a lot of inspiration, also from the policy work, but also from the communications you're doing, because environment is not that sexy in Ukraine, but you are doing this and you're making it sexy, and this is great. So I would invite you to talk more about your work and how in general is the climate policy in Ukraine framed, and what can we as civil society do to make it better and make it work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to speak here, and for all of the reflection of our work. I'm very happy that Леннард opened the panel, because for me it was also very interesting and important to hear your perspective and look from not the Ukrainian perspective, but what our work is looking from abroad or in general from your point of view. I made some notes while you were talking, because there are so many thoughts in my head which I want to share. So first of all, I think what Vasilina Below said at the beginning, at the opening of Ukrainian Pavilion, is that Ukraine is very lucky to have such active civil society. Is absolutely true, and I think this panel is again the proof for it. So what we will see and hear in the next hour is exactly the numerous examples on how Ukraine is likely to have this active civil society. Because I've heard it from many people from abroad and from Ukraine, is that one of the reasons why it's how it is now is because at the beginning of full-scale war, there was a very active civil society in Ukraine. We did not emerge like on the February 24 in 2022. There was a long-term existing Ukrainian civil society, very active in the various sectors, including human rights, including anti-corruption mechanisms, including environmental organizations who are here. This is quite a unique case when the civil society in Ukraine, as Леннард also mentioned, sometimes we are even taking some actions and some responsibility with what is needed also sometimes from the government. In this case, one of the interesting things and cases with Ukrainian civil society who work and was working here since, I don't know, it's actually very interesting how the environmental movement in Ukraine existed. It started after very actively started after the Chernobyl catastrophe in 1986 and rapidly developed from the anti-nuclear movement into more environmental and more climate movement. And with in the 90s, with the independence, it's developed bigger and broader. So having this history on the background, Ukrainian civil society right now, and I would say in the recent years it was even more obvious, is the institution or many small institutions or organizations who are working together and who have this institutional memory. I cannot say that I'm for so long in the working in environmental organizations, but to be honest, enough to know changes in the ministers, in the ministries, and so on. But for all of this time, we are here, we are working, we're helping Ukraine, we're really believing in the future. And I think this is one of the things which really unite Ukrainian civil society, is the hope for the future. Again, answering for the question, which I also hear a lot, why are you staying there? Majority of people who are in the room or who are working in our organizations, they're working and staying in Ukraine because I think we have a lot of hope for the future. And that's what is uniting us. And unity is actually one of the quite interesting features of Ukrainian civil society, at least in the environmental field. And I've heard a lot of questions from the especially colleagues from abroad, something like, do you compete for the funding? Do you compete for the topics? Honestly, from my experience, I've never seen like really competition among Ukrainian civil society organization towards some topics or funding or donors or something. We managed somehow work in like very good synchronization way. One of the roles in it, for example, in climate, is also Ukrainian Climate Network as the ground for this synchronization and support. So I don't know, I've seen it for years that every civil society organization in Ukraine working in environmental has some kind of specialization where they are more strong, more way or another. And it's always, we always find the way how to support each other works and how to support each other in a very difficult times, like the times of the full-scale war in Ukraine. I really think that sometimes we do not know how, like, do not see how unique it is for the civil society and an environmental topic. Another quite interesting thing I think about Ukrainian civil society in this current reality is the flexibility, which is kind of the response to this reality and it's probably one of these areas, like Леннард mentioned, there was colleagues who tried to do something in European countries, but they received more support in Ukraine. In the current reality, we are ready to act quickly, and we are ready to be active, flexible, and respond to the current reality, not trying to, okay, we need to have in a couple of months strategic meeting to think about it, which we see sometimes in some European organizations or organizations abroad. We just do not have time for this. We are really ready to act. So coming from this, I will just briefly say what EcoAction also doing in all of this, because again, I think in this panel, we also have a very interesting example on how all of us are partners at some point, but all of us have some focus on our work. So I will focus on the part of EcoAction related to the national legislation and national advocacy, and the actually participation here at the international level at the UNFCCC negotiations. EcoAction is one of the organizations who work for years strategically on the climate policies in Ukraine. For us, it's really important that everything we are doing is not emerge every year, like, okay, we need to do now this or this. For us, it's really important, and we actually have inside the organization the strategic plans for 2050, for 2030, for the next year. So for us, it's really important to have this work strategically, and I think we can see the results of this work. EcoAction, for example, was one of the organizations, again, together with the partners and together with the colleagues from the Ukrainian Climate Network, who actively was engaged in the advocating the 2050 neutrality goal for Ukraine, which was, luckily for us, for Ukraine, included in the climate law in Ukraine. Now we have this as the goal for Ukraine, but now we also have it as a civil society, like a kind of the lighthouse in the future where we can go. I personally think that, I don't know your personal experience, but I often feel, I would say that every environmental activist sometimes feel, is my work important or not? Do I see the impact? I think this is one of the examples you can really see the impact. And this is one of the examples you can really know that if not for the civil society organizations, I don't know what will be the result of this, what wording we would have in the law. There's many other examples on how the strategic and long-term work of civil society organizations is important. There is EcoAction's work, for example, on the Just Transition program in Ukraine. We finally have the strategy for it at the national level. There is a lot of work also at the EU directives and also at the trying to make these EU directives work in Ukraine. I will not talk a lot about our work with communities because I think our colleagues also will talk about this, because in this case we also collaborate a lot with the colleagues from different organizations trying to push for renewables, trying to work with adaptation to climate change. But in all of this, one of the very big and important roles we see as the organization is trying to be this link between the work with the local communities and the work at the national level with the climate policy, trying to connect them and trying to make the view of the Ukrainian civil society heard at the national level. Also in this case, at the international level, because EcoAction is probably the only organization which creates the position to the UNFCCC negotiations year after year. And we're very happy to hear the positive feedback, not only from the civil society, but from the representatives of the government, from the other stakeholders, that they know about the position, that they hear it. Hopefully it will be reflected somewhere in the negotiation streams. But again, all of this was possible due to the long-term strategic work on these issues, and also possible due to the support of the of other partners from other organizations. I will stop here to give more room to colleagues to talk about the other work on climate in Ukraine, but we'll be very happy to have more discussions on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sonia, for this input. This is really good to understand the general framing and the importance of, firstly, that we have to act strategic and plan in advance, because if we, yes, we are doing a lot and we are taking the opportunities, but still we have to see how everything fits in the whole picture. And if we are doing a lot of intervention and doesn't sum up in the end, it also doesn't make much sense. And then the other thing, what is really important to stress, is the institutional memory that the civil society is now giving the in general, Ukraine as a country, because we are focused, for example, the Ukrainian Climate Network is working from 2000. So we were established 2000s, and this is really like a bunch of expertise in one place. And you don't have to be an expert at everything, but you know a colleague who has the expertise, and you can just like write a message or write an email and say, okay, I need to know this and this and this. Where is your position on this and this and this? And this is really important. And one thing I want to also stress that we have a really interesting situation in Ukraine, because our civil society is not just acting, we are not just activists, we are kind of like small think tanks, because there is still, unfortunately, a lack of academic input. So our academia is still on developing. So, and this is good that we are now having more cooperation, more research that is just not just published and put somewhere on the footnotes, but also put into life and used to do reports and used to do actions. But mostly when we are doing some projects, the first step is to gather data, the second is to analyze, and only then to act. And this is why our projects are not the ones, like not the typical activist work we are doing. So, and this is also important that the colleagues from abroad know that we are not only covering for activists, but we're also covering from time to time for academia. And as Sonia already mentioned, we have a strong work pillar with in the climate network with local communities. And now I would pass the mic to Olena Kondratyuk from Eco Club Rivne. So actually, this is funny because your name of the organization is Eco Club, but everyone knows you as Eco Club Rivne. This is like the Mandela effect. I don't know why, but this is still like this, and everyone knows that you're from Rivne. Eco Club is great. You're working a lot with also local policies, with environment, and how to translate what is written in the documents into real action on the ground. So please tell us more about what Eco Club is doing, not only in Rivne, but also all over Ukraine, because you are like based local, but you are working also in the whole country and international. And tell us also more about your project and the impacts, because resilience is not only about infrastructure, but also about empowering people and giving them knowledge. And this is what you do.
Thank you for having me. And can you have next slide, please? Yeah. In the beginning, I want to tell you more about the organization where I work. As Diana mentioned, Eco Club is NGO, and we're based in Rivne, but we work across all the country and have more than 25 years of experience in the environment field. And on the slide, you can see our main direction to work is sustainable energy, district heating, environmental impact assessment, building the capacity of municipalities, and adaptation to climate change. And okay, what's going on the ground? Over time, decentralization reforms gave Ukrainian municipalities real powers and real autonomy. In theory, this opens the door for local climate leadership. But in practice, even before the war, municipalities faced serious limitations, lack of political will, budget shortages, and very often lack of technical expertise. And this is where civil society organizations like ours, and also eco-action and others. Step in, bringing gaps, building capacity, and offering practical solution. Next slide, please. Okay, and answering the question, the first step is turning climate adaptation into real action is political will. And based on EcoClub experience, demand is growing. As we can see, for the past years, EcoClub received more than 600 requests from communities for cooperation on the RES project. We already work with more than 100 communities on RES projects and 80 water utilities. And this huge interest shows that despite all challenges, municipalities want to move towards sustainability. Next slide, please. Okay, let's start from the long-term plans, what we do. Until recently, Ukrainian law did not require local governments to prepare climate adaptation plans. And even now, the new climate law allows time until 2027, or 2 years after the war ends. So every municipality that is developing an adaptation plan today is doing it voluntarily, driven not by obligation, but by responsibility. Many of them understand that these adaptation plans planning also unlocks EU funding and including LIFE and other programs. Also, we see growing motivation everywhere. Our adaptation UR platform, which collects implemented nature-based solution, received 50 applications from towns and villages from Ukraine. And also, for the last year, we have organized internship in Czech Republic about the climate adaptation, and we received 300 applications for only 14 places. This shows something important, that even during the war, Ukrainian municipalities want to learn, want to plan, and competing for opportunities and preparing for EU integration. And the next slide, please. So for EcoClub, adaptation is not only about the long-term strategy, it's also about survival today. And when the war started, we have started the campaign called Solar Aid for Ukraine. The aim of campaign is provide solar energy for water utilities and hospitals. And as of October 2025, we already built 72 solar power plants for such utilities. But our first pilot projects we did in 2020 in Voznesens, is Mykolaiv region. It was the first solar power station in water utilities in Ukraine. And now this model replaced rapidly during all country, because solar power now only not about economy in Ukraine, it's also about the energy independence during the war. And next slide, please. How we do this project and how we work with communities. We as EcoClub provide expertise, flexibility, engineering support, and help them find for such projects. Municipalities contributed sites, cooperation, and political commitment. This combination turned out to be very effective, and it started multiplying quickly. For example, cities like Zváhel in Zhytomyr Oblast, Sumy, or Voznesens in Mykolaiv region, we helped them to build the first solar power plants in their city, but now they invest their own money from municipal budget or looking for other funds, and at least each of the city has 3 solar power stations built by their own, because they see the main benefit. They have interrupted water supply, they have lower electricity bills, they dependent from diesel generation, and of course, such projects became like a source of political capital, proving to communities that renewable energy is achievable, it's reliable, and is cost-effective now. And this is how solar power became not an innovation. Now in Ukraine, it's a normal municipal choice during the war. Also, I want to say that a very important part of our work is helping communities move towards the European Union. EU integration is not only about adopting law, it's about aligning with values and practices like sustainability, transparency, community participation, and long-term planning. Even small steps such energy audits or setting up energy management system help build a culture of sustainability at the local level and bring communities closer to the EU family. So to summarize, even under hard circumstances, under shelling or limited resources, Ukrainian communities are proving that climate adaptation is not postponed until after the war. It's happening now every day through solar power plants that keep hospitals running, or water utilities through adaptation plans that meet standards, or through thousands of local decisions that strengthen resilience. And this is how Ukraine's green reconstruction looks. It's powered by communities, enabled by NGOs, and moving confidently towards Europe. So now Ukrainian communities is I think the good example for us, especially for Europe, how communities can not only survive, but also thinking about the future and the reconstruction after the war. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Olena, for stressing also that we cannot choose. We have to do it all. So we have to decentralize, we have to build renewables, but we have to do it resource effectively, and we have to do it with less and less harm for the environment. And this is great that you and EcoClub are providing this knowledge and guiding the communities. And also this is important because we still feel the lack and the void coming back, unfortunately, to academia and to environmental studies. We still don't have them. And then when you start to be a leader in your community, and then you see, okay, somebody has to do that, and how I approach this. And my organization has done a study, and we call it Climate Compass for Ukrainian municipalities. And we talked to people who were responsible for climate policies in Ukrainian communities, and surprised there is no one dedicated to this policy. So mostly this is someone who is dealing with energy or something regarded to they have already a lot to do, and then they have to think, what is climate policy and how can I put it in my community? So thank you so much for also helping them, not only with aid and money and infrastructure, but also building the capacity in the communities. And now we are going to our next speaker. This is Arina BİLAY. And if I would have an initiative like you, your NGO Rosvi, while I was a teenager or a young person, like a younger person, okay, I would love it. Because 2013-15, there was not much to do. And me, myself, I just wanted to visit some interesting events, but there were none. So I tried to do it myself. So I tried to organize events and I tried to invite people. And this is how it started. And I would love, and now I'm loving that youth is getting more active in the environmental topics, but not only, or this is also important on like some niche levels, or but also on national and international politics. So, and your activism is brilliant. What are you doing? And now maybe I would just like give much more information about, a bit more information about Rosvi. So this is a Ukrainian climate organization led by young women. And this is really, really great. And this is a movement which is advocating for a just, a climate resilient and inclusive post-war recovery of Ukraine by engaging unit policy. And this is really important because unfortunately in Ukraine, we have nobody, no institutions, which is really like providing the input of youth. So this is really like you have a crucial role to play now. And you're developing now also a activist community of young Ukrainian women through informal education and accessible digital media. And the intersectional approach, what you're also providing, this is really great, and creating a lot of opportunities to make more people be part of the green recovery of Ukraine. And now I would pass the mic to you and ask you to tell us more about your work in Ukraine and also abroad, because you're also doing abroad a lot of things. And maybe you can emphasize what is the motivation of young people to engage in climate policy and environmental issues and be not just have climate anxiety, but also do something about it.
Thank you very much. Okay, you can hear me. First of all, hi. Thank you very much for having me here. I would say that we are definitely a very crazy generation, and probably the reason for it is that for half of my life, I have the war going on in Ukraine for more than half of my life. And this definitely shapes the reality we live in, and that's why youth is going through so many more challenges that it would be going through if we didn't have the war. And these challenges include, for example, that we are constantly under attacks as people who stay in Ukraine. Those who are relocated are obviously going through the struggles of immigration. At the same time, we are having lots of our houses and universities, school damage, destroyed by Russia. Sorry for that. That's probably against UN rules. Okay, I just cannot stop saying that. So also lots of young people serve in the army, and lots of us have our close people, families or partners in the army, which also influences us a lot. And also all of us are going through some kind of loss, which is extremely terrible. And even though we are having all of these obstacles, we still have to work. And you can imagine that when you're young and when you're gaining education, either higher one or just like finishing your school, and when you also are in this process of developing your brain and your mindset and your political views, and having this huge obstacle of war going on is a terrible thing to happen to you. And basically it very much complicates the work we do. But why do young people at all engage in climate policy? That's a very interesting question, and I guess there is no one direct answer to it, but I'll give like 3 points which might be partially answering this question. So first is that when you live under the constant threat of the fact that you can die any night, any day, honestly, at this point, as we've seen today in Ternopil, like the city which is 200 kilometers from the European Union border, which seems to be very much in the center of Europe, and it's still being targeted. And yeah, it's a very tough obstacle. You just generally start wondering if you're going to be alive tomorrow, and there is no future visible. And sometimes it's like it's a normal thing for young people to Ukraine not to feel like there is any future before us. For example, for me, I would say, I would be honest that it's hard to imagine my life in more than 2 months, for example. So like the level of planning is very low here. But working on taking the climate action is actually the way to feel that this future is possible, because we are working to secure it. We want our future, if it is there, to be better than the reality is to us, and for our future to be more kind to us than the reality is. That's why we are working on it, and it also gives us hope. It's not sure that we're going to see this future. It's not sure that we're going to survive the next attack and anything what can happen to us in this country. But I mean, like, what's the other choice? Not to do anything? I guess it's not really the choice. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that lots of young people who are not connected to each other told me once that, generally why they are doing something around the climate or environment is because it keeps them distracted from the war and destruction and death they are seeing every day, which is also one of the points to do. Like, you want to secure your future, and that's why you do something, but also you're not working directly with this, for example, like with seeing deaths, which makes perfect sense. At the same time, what I think is even a bigger issue, why we do the climate activism in Ukraine as young people still, even when the war is going on, it's also, as I think, like, I want to emphasize what Diana also said in the beginning, is that it's like only the part of our work, because we cannot just focus on only climate crisis and only dealing with it. We have to focus on political issues and on war issues as well. So I would say that why are we fighting for the green Ukraine, for green recovery, is because this is a perfectly understandable continuation of our fight for our independence, sovereignty, and democratic Ukraine. So we are not fighting just to have borders and just to have political power on our land. This is also true. But at the same time, so obviously we need sovereignty and independence first. But what we need more is to have these values practiced in our country. And this is why we are working on the climate, because this is literally the continuation of the fight of the values we are fighting for, such as democratic values. So that would be it for the answer. And I would love to talk more about the ROSVI, which is a very, I would say, fresh NGO made in Ukraine, like registered in March 2023. So we are operating for 2 years now, maybe 2.5, 3. So we are a youth climate initiative, which is led by young women, and which is a community of young women who are different experts or young experts or not experts at all in different topics. And we are implementing an intersectional approach to our work. One of the important things is feminist and decolonial perspective, which we implement in our work, but that's going to be later. So we are generally advocating for a climate resilient, just and inclusive post-war recovery of Ukraine. And we want more youth to be engaged in the climate and recovery policy right now and not only somewhere in the future. So next slide, please. So this is our vision. It's very short, very precise, a just, green, democratic Ukraine. Next slide, please. What we do, well, generally lots of things. I would say that first, we grow a feminist climate movement in Ukraine, which is the most important thing we do. We are practicing these values of empowering young women in every step we do in our organization. We promote career development of young professionals in environmental and climate policy, because as lots of speakers said today, that our state capacity is sometimes pretty low, and we have to, and lots of policy makers are actually from the NGOs and not from the governmental side. So that's what we want to prepare as ROSVI, lots of other new pool of climate experts, which are young women or young people in general, young Ukrainians. We also foster international youth diplomacy in the climate sphere. What you can see right now is happening. This is a big important part of our work, because we, as our co-leaders and a few of our activists originate from the youth climate movement, which was happening before 2023, for example, since 2019, for instance, but not only. And yes, so that's also an important part, that we have close ties to the international movement. We also advocate for youth engagement in climate policy and green recovery process. We promote the concept of a green recovery, which is also extremely important, because for the climate action in Ukraine, you have to have the political will of our politicians, and who can demand the change. Obviously, youth is a very huge pool which can demand the change and therefore create the political will for the politicians to act. As well as that, we create accessible educational resources and opportunities for youth and accessible digital media. Next slide, please. About our current projects, they are not all of them, but these are the main ones. The first one is Where Future Grows, is a podcast which we launched this year. It's a podcast on climate crisis, sustainability, social justice, and green recovery of Ukraine. So, as we like, a very intersectional one. We bring expert knowledge to Ukrainian youth in a very accessible way. And yes, this is an ongoing project. The next one is Youth for Green Recovery Network, which is a project which aims to create a network of active young advocates for the green recovery. And they are going to be from all over Ukraine. Lots of them are going to be on the local level and not on the level of just like the capital city or the biggest cities, which is also a big issue for such a big country as Ukraine is. Also, this network will be focused on implementing the sustainable decisions on the ground, which are going to respond to the local challenges. And we are going to support each other there along the way in our process of implementing the projects. As well as that, we have a School of Climate Policy and Advocacy, which is a project on a year-long educational program for Ukrainian youth that familiarizes them with the climate policy and green recovery of Ukraine concepts. As well as that, we aim to create a pool of new climate advocacy makers from the youth and youth climate advocates who can actively engage in the recovery process in Ukraine itself, and as well as that on the international level. As well as that, we're integrating feminist perspective, as I said. So we educate also our community and the people around us, generally the civil society and all of the people who want to learn on gender-sensitive recovery, ecofeminism. As well as that, we are a part of Ukrainian and international feminist movement. We integrate the colonial perspective as well, which is a very important topic and not that much integrated into Ukrainian civil society, because we have a very big narrative of us being a part of Europe, but we never actually reflect on how Europe is the way it is because of its colonial history. But that's another topic not to be discussed today. So we generally connect Ukrainian climate movement to the climate movement on the global south and international climate movement. We also speak up in the international spaces on Russian colonialism in the region of Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. And yes, and we are also systematically present in the international spaces. It's our 4th COP, I believe. We empowered 5 young girls to come to COP during different times, and this is also an incredible achievement. Next slide, please. So just about quickly about our input, that we created a community of 20 or 22, if we also count our co-leaders, young women advocating for climate in Ukraine, and they are based in 7 countries, which is also kind of the part of the reality we live in, that we are very much far away from each other and our work is mainly online. But this is also our generation, which is very much used to this. So we also organized 2 offline policy dialogues, a climate art exhibition in Kyiv this year, a regional UN Youth Climate Conference, and the regional climate camp in Ukraine for the activists from Eastern Europe. As well as that, we joined the Ukrainian Climate Network, and yes, and that's pretty much lots of other things as well are happening here. It's only the highlights. So next slide, please. This is just some photos of our work from one of the years of our work, so yeah. And generally, we're very much open for any kind of cooperation. We are also very young, so we definitely need lots of support on our way. And you can turn to the next slide. If there are any questions or any... Next slide, please. Thank you. If you want to collaborate with us, you can contact us or just subscribe and look at the digital media, which is accessible to youth I was talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Arina, stressing also the work that you're doing, the approach is inclusive. So even when we thinking about the opportunities young people, but not only young people, just in general, people have in big cities. And for example, I'm living in Lviv, and then it just like I look around and this is so many possibilities to go somewhere, and I just like end up with a big FOMO and I don't go anywhere. And for people who are living in small communities, so they don't have nowhere to go, and this is great that you're creating also the space for them to also meet each other, to have something interesting to share, and also to broaden the knowledge, because empowering young people and giving them the courage to speak up, because mostly in school you're told just don't ask questions, because if you ask a question you just like seem to be stupid. But you have to ask questions, because only when you are asking you have the answer, and you can think about what are you going to do with this answer. And thank you so much for this great panel, and I am so lucky that we have such a broad expertise, and these are only 3 members of the Ukrainian Climate Network, and only on these 3 examples we can see how diverse and how great and how strong are the Ukrainian civil society. And now I will open the floor to questions, but while our audience is thinking, I will kickstart then with a question about cooperation and about working together. So a lot of you, actually all of you, stress that we have to work together. There is like academia, there are other NGOs, there are the political realm. So what do you think? So what which strategies are there strategies which are working, how to include the actors, like all the actors, or at least like few of them, to cooperate and then to create impact in the work in the field we are doing. So what do you think? Or maybe you can reflect or just reflect. You can also reflect on the other panelists. So this is also an option. Maybe you heard something you can build on your other thesis. So who wants to start?
Thank you. Actually, thank you very much for this question, because I wanted to reflect on what you said at some of the interventions. You mentioned academia, and that sometimes they are not very active or lack the view on some things or something like this. So I'm a bit disagree with this. One of the things is because I myself is coming on with a background both working in academia and in NGO. From one hand, from another hand is because Eco-Action, I would say, quite actively try to engage people with a scientific background and from academia into our work. Why? Because I think everyone here absolutely agree that there cannot be the climate policy or action on climate without the very good scientific basis. And scientific basis is also everywhere in this UNFCCC room. There are some countries who try to actually exclude the language on science from UNFCCC negotiations. But okay, this is about the international part. But in Ukraine, I think we have actually a lot of very good examples of the collaboration between academia and NGOs. Why? Because NGOs sometimes lack all the expertise on all of the questions. It's just not possible. But in academia, there is a lot of people who know these things, but they lack capacity to communicate properly, into like sexy, as you said at the beginning, like how to make the communication of some scientific findings, or how to make to communicate climate interesting to people. So I really see in this part a very promising and very good field for collaboration, because each of us have something that other part lacks. And we have, and actually the research Леннард was mentioning, I think it's a very great example when there is NGOs which is trying to push the communication part of work, the visibility, the advocacy. And there are scientists who can do the actually counting, scientific part of work, everything. So I would say that it's very beneficial for both parts. So we as an NGO, I would say, even have responsibility to make the advocacy and the communication work for the scientific findings that are available here. Thank you.
And I want to add that one of the way how we cooperate is Ukrainian Climate Network. And for example, our experience of cooperation with Eco-Action is, as Sophia mentioned in her speech, that each NGO has specific focus, and some NGOs lacks of experience on the ground. We, for example, not so active on the national level as Eco-Action. So it's where we cooperate. We as Eco Club can provide more expertise from the ground, and we cooperate with Eco-Action to combine this experience from the ground to the national, to the government, to hear the community's voices.
And just to add on our, the project that we're working on, I mean, you saw it also yesterday on the event. It's also the government. So it's it's NGOs, it are the scientists. I see one walking over there, and it's the government. So I think that's really the strong point at the moment. From the outside, from an outsider, not knowing Ukraine, it can be a bit confusing because Ukrainians tend to have an official title, then they're always using a Gmail account and not their work account. So people ask me, but don't you have work email? And then the title doesn't correspond actually with what the person is doing. So for an outsider, if you don't have the network or you don't have the understanding, it can be a bit complicated, but in these kind of circumstances, your official position is less relevant to who you are, who you know, and what you can do.
Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning this also. This is really interesting, but as we told already, like everything relies on people, everything relies on expertise, and everything relies on connection. Therefore, the best way to work and to develop and to be resilient is to connect and to support each other. Although we are working in the same sphere, in the sphere of protecting the environment, we have different focal points and we can support each other as we are doing now. So do we have other questions from the audience? Yes.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to admit that I had worked with, in one way or another, with all these people and with all these NGOs. So these are incredible people who know for sure what they're doing. And Sophia already mentioned this necessity to have this intersection and cooperation of academia and civil society, and Леннард also added the government. But from your perspective, what are the gaps in civil society that need to be filled, like specifically considering the full-scale invasion, especially? Like, what are the issues that sometimes remain silent in civil society organizations? What may be new civil society organizations we need, and what gaps we need to fill in to be as effective as Ukrainian civil society as possible?
I have some answer to that question. So I think one of the gaps which is right now present in the civil society in terms of climate action is climate action led by veterans, or the people generally, like also the military people who are serving right now, because this is a very, very, very big group of people. As well as that, it might be other people who are kind of not marginalized, but like are in a very unprivileged group due to the war actions. But I would say that veterans are like the biggest group, which is now not kind of targeted by any as a target audience of any of the current climate organizations, as far as I know for now. There is a huge potential on the on the mental health recovery of the veterans through green zones, for example, as a very specific niche which can be targeted. And I think we can just very precisely say that we are kind of trying to develop a project on that. So this is going to be my part of what I see. Any other ideas?
Thank you. Thank you very much for mentioning it. I think this idea is definitely in the room, and I really hope that there will be more collaboration on this and more projects for veterans in Ukraine. I think one of the gaps or maybe missing links is there is, I would say that we are not using as much as possible, for example, the connections with the human rights groups, which is really relevant for Ukraine, really relevant to the issues we are raising as environmental organizations, for example, as the impact of Russian war on the environment and on climate, and the right of people to the healthy environment. So I see there is a lot of possibilities to collaborate on it. So it's probably not the gap, but I would say we're now in the situation of these missing links with the existing organizations inside Ukraine, but also outside Ukraine. I would also say that some of these missing links and gaps, Rosby definitely filled in with this work with the feminism organizations and working with the broader community in the world with the youth organizations. So your work is a very good example how the climate related work could be linked to other work streams, and I would say the human rights and organizations working on gender, for example, could be very interesting to have more work on.
I just want to add to Arina what she said about the veterans. Unfortunately, it wasn't a public. It wasn't published on Eco Club social media, but this year we had like training on the solar installation for veterans, and we also provide the small scale solar station for veterans in our region. I hope we will publish it soon in our media to tell it. And talking about your question, I think there's also like a lack of knowledge how to do it and how to combine. So it's like there's needs of capacity building to create such conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I allow myself also to answer your question, Marina. So I see actually two gaps, two big gaps, because the other you mentioned, and I think some other can add more. The first one is to work with indigenous people and local communities. For example, Crimean the Tatars or Roma community, we have them in Ukraine, but they are not that included in our rhetoric, but not included at all. So this is a big gap I'm seeing now. And the other one is in the means of reconstruction of Ukraine is the linkage of climate resilience and nature-based solutions with the reconstruction processes and with new infrastructure for people with disabilities. So this is the field we have to collaborate on, because you can build a new nice square using nature-based solutions. And this is really important. And this is what we are trying to do in Lviv with our NGO Plato. And this is, I think, the topic we have to be really quick on making connections and jumping right into this, like running and jumping into this process. Yeah, the rain is falling heavy on us. So maybe we will take a last question if there is one, or if there is none, then I will conclude. So thank you. Yeah, okay.
So one thing I would like to add about, a little bit about the Ukrainian society, and I'm now going to cite someone who can, said it very well. You probably know him. It's Yaroslav Ritsak, a Lviv-based historian. He said, Ukraine has long been a democracy more by default than by institutional design. Its liberties were grounded not in independent courts or in parliament, but in the pragmatisms of power groups, the diversity of regions, the weakness of the central state, and perhaps above all, the ability of its people to come together at moments of crisis. Ukraine's muscular version of democracy has served it well during times of war, but leaves it vulnerable in times of peace. And I think that's very striking, very well said, but it also means that you, as I would say, civil society, have to prepare for this post-war period, which will, well, I could say, more difficult, but a very different time. And you are needed to keep Ukraine on its path that is today.
Thank you so much, Leonard, for this citation. And I can also reaffirm that Ukrainians tend to unite against something, not for something, and we have to change this approach. So thank you again for all the panelists. And today we discovered that resilience is not abstract. It's about women leading youth in recovery, is about NGOs combating climate change with policy measures. It's about building local capacity, and it's about monitoring, measuring, and providing data to be science-based and to work in the right direction. So thank you so much for the conversation here, and let this conversation be a reminder for also the international community that Ukraine's recovery and the support of Ukraine means being allied with climate justice, with human dignity, and build a livable future for a lot of great people. So thank you so much for the discussion. Thanks so much to the audience, and hope to see you again soon in Ukraine.